Well, folks, this is either going to be a colossal failure or a significant win. I've got this fender for this 57 Chevy pickup, and it looked like something fell against the top of the eyebrow. It's got a... Let me get the camera down. So there is a significant crease right there, and there's a pretty good one right there. And it's right on the top of the eyebrow. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to take a torch and I'm going to heat it and try to bend everything back somewhat where it was at. What the expectation is, once we get it sort of in shape, maybe I can metalwork the thing. I don't know. I can tell you, this is way above my skill set. All right, I'm gonna light the torch. I'll let the camera run, but I'm gonna light the torch and start banging. crease over there, and this crease isn't entirely out. But I'm gonna flip it over and see what it, I think we're still too flat here. Let me flip it over and let's have a look at it. We're still flat. This is still pushed down. Need to get that kink out right there. And we still got a kink right here. All right. Question now is, we kind of got it back in shape. I'm beginning to think I need to put it back on the pickup so I can kind of hold it better and maybe work out this final kink. Not sure how that kink's coming out yet. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get it mounted on the front of the pickup. So I'm going to shut you off and I'm going to get it mounted and I'll bring you back. All right, folks, we got this thing put together. It's been 2 or 3 days since I last filmed, because I've been trying to get these body panels put on this thing. My thought was, before I really dig into this, into making this all fit, you know, fix this dent up here, I better do the best I can in putting everything together, right? Because if you don't get it right, you're kind of baking in the problems. So let me, it's about 2 days worth of work here. I'll walk you around. I've had both doors off, and surprisingly enough, all the bolts came out. Now I broke a couple of nuts, you know, in behind. I'm going to have to fix those, but all 12 bolts came out of the doors. If you didn't know that, these trucks have 12 bolts in each door. Wow. All right, let me take you around and I'll show you the gaps I've got, where I've got right now. We'll start with the driver's side because that's the good side. So you can see I've got the headlight bucket, I've got all of the screws in the front end, I've got all the surround for the grill. If you look at the hood gap, this hood's a little high on this side, so it needs to go down over here, but it doesn't look like the gap's too bad. If anything, I'm wondering if the front of the cab needs to go up just a little bit. But our gap's pretty good here. This is pretty level. We've got the doors. It's kind of tight up on the front side between the door and the fender. And we got a gap here, but it closes up around the door. And then I did get a gap behind, right? You know, in one of the earlier videos, or sometime in one of the previous clips, I showed you that this was actually rubbing up here. So we got that opened up, and the gap widens just a little bit, so it's almost like the door could twist that way, but don't have a whole lot to give up here. A little bit. And the cow gap, that actually looks pretty good. So I decided that door was where it was going to be, and this fender is probably where it's going to be. Obviously, I'm going to take another round at trying to align panels on this thing, but I thought that was pretty close. This side, the hood and the fender are pretty close, except that the gap is a little wide. And that comes in back here. This is a little over 1/4 inch. On the other side, it's a little under 1/4 inch, so I can live with the other side. This side's still going to have to come in just a little bit. The door gap on this side isn't bad. You can see we got a little more gap here than we did on the other side. But all in all, this door doesn't fit too bad within the gap, within the hole. It's kind of interesting. This door fits better than the other side, but this fender, the other side fender seems to match up a little better. So, you know, I figure another couple of days and taking it all apart again a couple of times, maybe I can get the gaps where I want them. But that said, I think everything is close enough that now take a final pass at this fender. Now, I beat on it a little bit, and I actually tied a chain on it here to try to, and I did pull it out a little bit. Had the tractor out there and had to come along in a chain here and pulled on it and beat on it, and it had buckled the side of the fender, so I've had the chain tied to 2 or 3 different places on this thing, pulling it out and then trying to straighten it out. At this point, it's pretty straight. I think it's just this area here, you know, kind of along the top here, that is still the problem. And what I've decided to do, let me show you. What I've decided to do is use the fender off my dad's truck, which they're not interchangeable. You notice that's about 4 inches right there. And that's about 2 inches. So the big trucks gain width by adding a couple inches right there in that window right there. As near as I can tell, the headlight bucket is exactly the same thing in terms of shape and profile and everything else. So my thought is I'm going to take a big cut out of the headlight bucket area on my dad's fender. And then just cut this section off and try to graft that headlight bucket into here. And the more, you know, the more I looked at it, I'm like, well, I really don't want to get into any problems here, so I think I'm going to trim this headlight bucket inside the body line right there, and then remember it's kinked right here. Right, this side was all bent, but it's kinked there, so I think cut outside that and try to cut all of the heat deformed area out, and the bent and crushed and you name it. Try to cut that out, but leave this bottom body line in here so that when I cut this patch panel, if you will, out of my dad's fender, then I can use this lower body line to line up that patch, and then just do the cut and butt type thing and cut around the perimeter and weld it in. That's what I'm thinking anyway. One thing that if you haven't done any body panel heating with a torch, this one I decided to, and you saw it, I heated it up a bunch, but this thing was stretched a lot, right? And so when you heat the metal, it wants to contract when it cools. So by and large, it's just about got all of that stretching out. Still made a mess. All right, I'm gonna set the camera back there, and I'm gonna whittle away at this a little bit at a time, I think. And I'm gonna get this one cut out of this fender, and I'm gonna make it big. I'm gonna cut way more than I need out of the original fender, so that I'm I make sure that I can cover up what I cut out of this fender. All right, I'm gonna set the camera back and I'm gonna start cutting. Looks like I need to clean out all of the undercoating underneath this. That's gonna take me a bit. Let me get back with you. All right, folks. Well, I got it welded in. You guys have seen me weld a lot of metal. Interesting thing about this is I'm not entirely convinced that the big fender is exactly the same as the small fender. There was a little bit of difference in the curvature right here. So this took me a while to kind of straighten out. The other thing is, apparently, I didn't actually have all of the deformity worked out of this fender. The original fender seemed to be just a little squashed and wide, so quite honestly, I've got quite a bit of time in this and getting the patch to fit. I mean, welded in and welding in just took time, right? But getting this thing to fit, that was interesting. The other thing is the key to doing something like this is, let me get a level. Right, so you want the level to hit the same, because the front of the headlight is rounded. You want the level to hit in about the same location on both sides, right? In effect, that keeps the headlight square to the front. Now, I'm off just a little bit, but I think it's close enough for government work. But that is probably the most critical measurement doing this, is just making sure that this front is level, because you can kind of eyeball it where it's square, right? Not twisted. But the in and out, that took me a while. In addition to just having to fight this flattened fender. So, be that as may, it's in there, and I think it looks pretty good. Now, I need to grind this all down. Probably go back and fill up some pinholes, and then figure out how much hammering and dollying I'm gonna have to use. All right, I'm gonna shut you off. I'm gonna grind this thing because I'm gonna be here for a bit. Well, folks, I think that's as good as it's gonna get right now. It's pretty straight. Still got a little bit of a gap, but it's not bad at all. Still got a lot of body work to do on this thing, so there's gonna be lots of time to clean up the last few bobbles on it. But I'm pretty pleased with that. Let me set the, let me put the headlight bezel in like I did on that side, just to make sure everything still fits.
Take a seat and let your head drop from the rooftops. 'Cause you got by for the last time. You're a gold mine swinging in the blackberry vines. There'll come a time when you can rest your eyes on my good side. When I walk a steady line, yeah, someone consider my life of a sinner, but maybe I just need a babysitter. Doubled so fast, give you whiplash. And everybody kept asking the same question: how you doing? Did you walk a steady line? Yeah, I've been looking rough and acting tough for days. I think we need a raise. Full compromise for the first time. We gonna get it right tonight.
Well, I think that looks pretty good. It looks pretty level across the top, near as I can tell. I think that looks pretty good. I am happy to get this thing all put together. I think the last thing in terms of just pieces to make sure I got all the pieces is to come up with a grill. I don't know what I'm going to do about the front at this point, but I think the next video, we're going to see what I can come up with come up with for a grill. Now, I don't intend on trying to disguise this thing as a half ton. I'm gonna put the 4400 emblems on this. This is my dad's truck. We're not gonna hide anything on this. So I am thinking real seriously about putting the big truck grill in there. Now the downside is, you know, this opening is bigger on the big truck than it is on the half ton through 1 tons. So we'll have to shorten that thing down. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, hope you found this interesting. You know, if you did, hit the like button, make a comment. And if you like what we're doing, go ahead and, hit the, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'm Random at RandomRodShop, and I'm out of here.